Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about lesson 2, which is starting to solve quadratic equations using square roots. So when we talk about solving quadratic equations, again, last chapter, if I gave you a parabola of any sort and told you to graph it or gave you a picture, you could find the zeros, like maybe it was 1 and 6. All right, so those are your roots or your zeros or your solutions. But you also need to be able to find those same things using one of the algebraic methods. So we're going to talk about using square roots, a little bit about factoring, and then the quadratic formula is what I like to use the most because it works every time. The methods I'm going to show you today and in the next lesson will work for some, but not all. So I really like to focus on the quadratic formula. But again, keep in mind when we're looking at these, you might be able to, not necessarily these, but you might be able to look in your calculator to see the graph and find the zeros that way. So when we want to solve using square roots, we're going to use inverse operations. All right, inverse operations just mean opposite operations. What I mean by that is if you see adding, you would subtract. If you saw multiplication, you would divide, and vice versa. All right, it's just like solving a regular equation from unit 1. It's just we have a square root involved. So your goal is to get x squared or the parentheses with x squared by itself. Once you do that, you're going to take the square root of both sides. And the thing to remember is there are two answers, just like up here, there are 2 zeros, right? 2 different answers. All right, so let's get into it. So just like a regular equation, if you want to, you can draw the line down from the equal sign. I want to get the x squared by itself, so I'm going to circle the 2x squared. I see that plus 10 I'm going to subtract. So I'm left with 2x squared equals 28 minus 10, 18. Divide both sides by 2. X squared equals 9. All right, so x squared is now alone. So now we can move to step 2. We're going to take the square root of both sides. So x equals, you might just say 3, but you have to remember x could also equal -3 because -3 times -3 is 9 and 3 times 3 is 9. So there's 2 answers, and rather than writing them separately, you're going to see them written like this. X equals positive or -3. Okay, so that's it. All right, I'm going to draw my line down for the next one. There's a fraction involved, so I'm going to circle the fraction. It makes it easier to see what we have to do first. I see a -5, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. I'm left with x squared over 2 equals 8. Well, over 2 just means dividing by 2, so to get rid of dividing, we're going to multiply by 2 on both sides. So x squared equals 16. To get rid of the squared, it makes it disappear, so you're just left with x equals, and then its square root of 16 is 4, not 8. All right, second x squared, 16, 4, because 4 times 4 is 16. -4 times -4 is 16, so your answer could be +4. Oh my goodness. Positive and -4. If it wants to erase for me, whatever. So again, it could be positive or -4. And that's it. All right. This next one's going to be a little bit more tricky. I'm going to start by adding 2 to both sides. I'm left with 5x squared equals 40. And then we'll divide both sides by 5 to get x squared equals 8. All right. Now we have to take the square root. The problem is 8's not a perfect square. Right? If I do second x squared 8, I get 2.82. That's an irrational number. So we need to simplify it. So there's 2 ways you can simplify it. You can use your calculator. If you go to y equals, You could type in 8 divided by x squared. We learned that last lesson. And then go to your table and go down until you find a 1. I don't see 1. We already passed it. 2 radical 2 right there. All right, so again, you could go to the table, type in y equals 8 divided by x squared. And then when you go to the table, go down until you see a 1 or something that would round to 1. And you saw 2, 2, so that means that it's 2 radical 2. The other way to do it is by hand. The perfect square that goes into 8, we can break it up into 4 times 2. Right? 4 times 2 is 8. The square root of 4 is 2, and then the radical 2. So you can either get that 2 radical 2 from your table, or you could get it by simplifying. But either way, we need to remember that it could be positive 2 radical 2 or negative. So make sure you have both of those signs. So we went from here and then came back to here. Little tricky with that simplifying, I know. All right. Practice makes perfect, though. All right, so next one. A little tricky because our x squared's in a different spot. But again, if you just circle it, including the sign that's attached to it, you might see, okay, I got to subtract that 25 first. So we have negative 7x squared equals, maybe you can do it in your head, but if you want, double check it in the calculator. You're going to have to divide anyways. Negative 311, oops, second quit to get out of there. Negative 311 minus 25, negative 336. All right, now I still have to get rid of multiplying by negative 7, so we're going to divide by negative 7. X squared equals, well, we can just hit divide by negative 7. 48, okay, perfect. Ready to take the square root, but unfortunately, 48's not a perfect square. So again, you could say, all right, 48 is the same as 16 times 3, so you could do it that way. Square root of 16 is 4 radical 3. Maybe, it's not easy for you to do that in your head, so if you go to y equals 48 divided by x squared, and write that down as I tell you. Some of you are just watching this, and then you're like, I don't know how to do this. Look at your notes. I don't have it in my notes. Well, write them down. That's why I'm doing it. I do it on the video, and then I do it 8 different times in class. So if you want to learn it, you got to write it down. You got to practice it. All right, so second graph to go to the table, 1 radical 48, 2 radical 12, 4 radical 3, and then 1. So 4 radical 3 is your answer. So we go over here, and then we come back to get positive or negative 4 radical 3. Okay? If you can at least get to positive or negative 48, fine, but you really should try to simplify it. If it's multiple choice and you're like, I don't remember how to simplify, if this is what you got and this is one of the answer choices, type it into your calculator to see if it matches. Okay? There's lots of things you can do with that calculator. You just need to take the time to actually do it. Okay, with this one, if you look back up at the steps, it does say to get x squared or the parentheses with x squared by itself. Well, if you look, there's nothing outside the parentheses, so that means it's time to take the square root of both sides, which is nice because the square root of 25 is a perfect square. And what happens is the square root knocks out the squared and the parentheses, so you're just left with x minus 2 equals, and again, it's not just 5, it's positive 5 and negative 5. All right, we'll leave it like that. I still see a minus 2, so I've got to add 2 to both sides. So x equals, you got 2 different answers. X equals, we're going to go positive 5 plus 2. So x would be 7. And then x equals negative 5 plus 2. So x equals -3. Okay? So again, once you're here, you got to break it up into two. You've got your positive root, and then you got your negative. All right. Two more, almost done. So with this one, the parentheses aren't alone, so we got to divide by 2 to get that 2 out of there. Can't distribute that because of the squared. All right, we just got to get it out of there. So I'm left with x minus 1 squared equals 36. If you're not sure, put in your calculator. Now I can take the square root of both sides and it gets rid of my x squared. And I'm left with x minus 1 equals positive 6 and negative 6. Add 1 to both sides. So I'm left with x equals positive 6 plus 1. So x equals 7. And then I'm left with negative 6 plus 1. So x equals -5. Okay. Last example. I apologize for the bells. All right, we got to get this minus 10 out of there, or the positive 10, so we'll subtract. X minus 3 in parentheses squared equals 28. Now we've got to take the square root, which is nice. It gets that out of there. So positive and negative. 28 is not a perfect square. All right, so if I did the square root of 28, I don't want to leave it like that. So you can either go to y equals and do 28 divided by x squared and go to the table. 2 radical 7. Or you could have said, okay, 28 is the same as 4 times 7. Square root of 4 is 2. Radical 7 stays. So again, I pull it out and put it back in there. Again, you can find that by either using the calculator trick or by hand. All right, now the last part of this, whoops. Hold on one second. Where did it go? There it is. So the last part of this, you got this -3, so we're going to add 3 to both sides. Here's the thing. We can't add the 2 and the 3 together. We can't add. It's like a package deal. So when you write your answer, it's going to look like this. X equals, I'm going to put the 3 first, and then the positive or negative 2 radical 7. I know that looks kind of funny when we get into using the quadratic formula, which I told you works every time where this doesn't. Your answer will already be set up like this. All of your answers will look like this. So again, this is the last two were kind of tricky, but basically get get the x squared or the parentheses with x squared by itself. If you end up with a perfect square, great. Break it up into 2. If not, just leave the plus or minus in front of it and put the 3 in front of that. All right. So we'll get some practice in on the next page. These shouldn't be too bad for you. Let me see. The only one, number 4, you can't reduce it, but the rest should be fine. And actually, looking at the key that I just finished up, I don't think you have any square roots that aren't perfect squares to worry about. So shouldn't be too bad for you. Ignore my numbering. All right, have a great day, everybody.